Well, guys, they're coming in hot. Quick, all hands, man your battle stations, power up the shields. Now, I know some people are going to think that was pretty cringy, which it definitely was. But hey, you've got to admit that it's at least a little more creative than smash that like button, let's reach 100 gazillion trillion likes, and whatever everybody else on YouTube does these days to get people to hit the like button on their videos. Also, I've got a feeling that there are going to be a lot of people that see the title and rush into the comments section to defend Bethesda no matter what. And before you do, just consider that you criticize a game or franchise you like because you love and or care about that game or franchise. So just know that that's where I'm coming from before you jump to any conclusions. But enough skits and intro, let's just jump into this video. What's going on, guys? This is VinylicPuma, back with another Fallout video, and today I wanted to talk about Fallout lore and what I guess is Bethesda's joke about Fallout lore inconsistencies, issues, breaks, or whatever you want to call it. Now, I originally found out about this traversing the internet a few days back, and the websites that reported on it actually got their information from a Fallout 76 subreddit post. So I'll link all of that in the description if you're interested, but the gist is, in Fallout 76, you can go to a location known as the Riverside Manor, and on one of the terminals there is a list of fan mail containing a joke. Now, of the 3 different pieces of fan mail, and for our purposes, I'm going to be talking about the second one, which is titled Eye of Ra Continuity Issues. The whole entry is pretty long, but it reads as follows. Miss Rivers, I wanted to complain about the history of the Eye of Ra as depicted in Season 7, Episode 12, The Thieves of Thebes. This episode seems to suggest that the Mistress may not have possessed the Eye during her second expedition to Egypt to vanquish the cult of the Unseen Seer. As I'm sure you know, in Mistress of Mystery number 141, a flashback shows the Mistress wearing the Eye at a museum gala that must have occurred between the first and second expeditions. The fan consensus is that she obtained the Eye during the first expedition, although I personally think it was among the relics she inherited from her father, the archaeologist. Your line could be taken to mean that she didn't have it with her at the time, but that seems unlikely since she wore it, or a similar brooch, in several panels near the beginning of the Sorceress Plague arc, which is set only a few days later. As a longtime fan of your work, I know how important maintaining the history and continuity of the Mistress canon is to you, and I hope you will speak with the writers about being more careful with this in the future. Sincerely, Kent Connolly from Fallout 4. P.S. Like many fans, I was dismayed by the changes to the Garb of Secrets introduced in the most recent issue. While I understand the difficulty of actually fighting in a full evening dress in the upcoming television show and possible feature films, the full-length dress has been a staple of the Mistress costume since her debut. I'm planning to organize a letter-writing campaign about this, and I'd appreciate your support. PPS, I'm a huge fan of your work, and I'm looking forward to your appearance in the Silver Shroud show next year. Okay, so that's a lot to unpack, and before I dissect and really start to rip into this thing, I think this terminal entry was meant to be a lighthearted joke. After all, it's definitely fair to say that there is a general trend among a lot of different fandoms where parts of the community get upset about one thing or another in a particular franchise or piece of entertainment. If you're someone that has watched this channel for quite a bit of time, I've been someone that's very critical of Bethesda's retcons to the Fallout lore, so I feel to some degree this joke is being made at my expense. With that said, I should say that I think or have a pretty good idea that this terminal entry isn't coming from a bad place on the behalf of the writing team at Bethesda. However, I do want to talk about this joke, as I do think it's been made in very poor taste, but let me give you my interpretation of the joke before we get into that. For the first paragraph, which is talking about the Eye of Ra, which is an item, I think it's a parallel to a lot of the Fallout fanbase's complaints about Jet. The line, "This episode seems to suggest that the Mistress may not have possessed the Eye during her second expedition to Egypt to vanquish the cult of the Unseen Seer," could easily read, Fallout 4 seems to suggest that Myron may not have created Jet during Fallout 2, where the player vanquishes the Enclave. The PS section is talking about a garb, or a piece of clothing, which represents a certain iconic armor from Fallout 2. The paragraph starts with, "Like many fans, I was dismayed by the changes to the garb of secrets introduced in the most recent issue." To which I would interpret it as, "Like many fans, I was dismayed by the changes to the Exo and armor introduced in the Nuka World DLC for Fallout 4. Ultimately, this joke is meant to poke fun at a considerable amount of the fanbase that has been critical of Bethesda's changes to the Fallout lore over the years. If anything, it's sort of reminiscent of William Shatner's somewhat famous and infamous 1980s Saturday Night Live skit. And for those of you that are unfamiliar with what I'm talking about, there are a bunch of comedians in this skit posing as Star Trek fans or Trekkies that are asking Shatner these really in-depth questions about his character, James T. Kirk, to which Shatner just eventually replies, "Get a life, it's just a TV show." I'll link a YouTube clip of it in the description of this video if you want to see it so you know what I'm talking about. But if it's not there anymore because it got taken down by NBC or whoever, just search William Shatner Get a Life on YouTube, and you should be able to find a clip or two yourself. Now at the time, reception of Shatner's skit was sort of mixed. I think the mainstream thought that the skit itself was pretty funny and saw it for the joke that it was, which was a joke that was being made at the Trekkies' expense. At the same time, a lot of diehard Trekkies, as well as many passing Star Trek fans and enthusiasts, looked at the joke from a point of either indifference to even slight or utter disgust. There's a couple of really interesting comments about the whole scenario that are documented on the Fanlore Wiki, which come from an old Star Trek magazine called Interstat, as well as another one called Constellation. The one from Interstat reads as follows. The sketch on Star Trek convention attendees was somewhat less hilarious. Not because of his talent, but because of the script, which was an uneasy mix of hyperbole, inside jokes, some genuine humor, and cruelty. The second one was written in 1993, is a little less polite, and is from the Constellation, and says as follows. My mind takes me back to the Saturday Night Live sketch set at a Trek convention. All of the people there were the stereotypical fan as described in my first paragraph. Although sometimes we need to laugh at ourselves, some of that sketch was genuinely funny, some sadly true. It was quite unnecessary for William Shatner to appear and make the comments that he did. Get a life, he said. As fans, it's us who gave him a life. A darn good one at that. Surely we deserve some respect from him. At least most of the other stars take the time to talk to their fans at conventions. Strange we may be, but we pay their bills, and they know it. Consider for a second that both of these opinions on the SNL skit were relatively moderate opinions. Both individuals enjoyed the joke, however they did express concern over the joke being made and found it in poor taste. I think it's fair to say that both of these people are reasonably well adjusted to the real world and aren't like the hardcore Trekkie fans, which were almost certainly offended by the joke being made at their expense. With this in mind, how did any Star Trek fans, casual or extreme, benefit from Shatner appearing on SNL to make fun of the more extreme elements of the Star Trek fandom? If you ask me, the only people that benefited from this were the people that already hate Star Trek and just want to punish the nerds. Going back to Fallout for a second, who benefits from this terminal entry joke being made at the more hardcore lore enthusiasts' expense? Maybe a couple of sycophants and yes-men get a cheap laugh out of upsetting people that cared about these aspects of the lore, but it only seems like anyone that already dislikes Fallout and or doesn't like or care about Bethesda's style of RPGs are the ones that truly benefit. My point being, engaging in activities like this are a net negative and only serve to make fans feel indifferent and or slightly to significantly upset about the whole situation. As Martin Eade in that Constellation article so eloquently put, by telling people to get a life or get over it in this instance seems silly when those are the same people that gave you life in the first place. I also would say as a YouTuber who is a fan in some capacity, I built a significant part of my life around talking about the mystery and magic surrounding the universe that you, Bethesda, in part created. I suppose I owe my existence and success to a combination of luck, your tolerance for YouTubers like me, or just your action of putting out a great game in the first place, but just as much as you give me life, I give you some in return. I may not be able to write a story, write backstory, design art, design gameplay loops, or whatever else as good as you can, but I can talk about and bring some magic to what you create because it comes from a very genuine, personal, and honest part of who I am. The reason that I or any other fan criticize you and the decisions that you make with the Fallout lore comes from a place of genuine admiration, dedication, and passion for the world that not only you helped create, but also the world that Obsidian and Black Isles developers helped create. Fallout is a franchise that deserves to be treated with respect, and if you don't take the lore and other source material seriously, people will pick up on it and walk away. In fact, I think the reason that you're seeing Fallout 76 fail so spectacularly comes from this. Whether it's a Metascore in the 50s from reviewers, stories about how Fallout 76 has sold 82.4% less copies than Fallout 4 did at launch, or every outlet, including Bethesda.net itself, selling the game at 30% discounts right now, it's clear that a lot of Fallout fans feel burned by a number of questionable decisions that were made surrounding this game. Admittedly, quite a number of those decisions go beyond the lore and involve severe technical issues with the game itself, but the attention to the smaller details surrounding things like the lore definitely played a big part in Fallout 76's downfall. As a great example, the retconning of fan-favored factions like the Brotherhood of Steel, regardless of what defenders of the decision might say, was a huge mistake, and I'm surprised it even got greenlit. We can argue semantics and nuances of the lore all day and talk about if the Fallout Bible is canon or not, but if the already accepted consensus among the casual fanbase is that they shouldn't be there, and there's sufficient evidence within the lore itself and within previous canonical entries in the series that suggest as much, they shouldn't be put in the game, period. The Brotherhood of Steel example in particular is a big reason why I don't find this joke funny, and again, why I find it to be in poor taste. Like Shatner with the Star Trek fans, I shouldn't be hearing this from Bethesda, and the fact that I am hearing it from you worries me a little. Again, I don't think it comes from a bad place, and I'll assume that you guys mean well, but don't you think the Fallout lore should at least be taken at least a little bit more seriously? Especially since the reception to the Brotherhood appearing in Fallout 76 was received so poorly by the community once it was discovered. You may think some of your more hardcore fans are weird, and I would agree that certain circles are far more critical and even a little nasty towards Bethesda, but the truth of the matter is that a lot of us fans that are pointing out lore inconsistencies aren't doing it to score points over you. We're doing it so that they may be addressed in a more compelling and interesting way that enriches the story that you helped create. I also think my point is, if you're going to change something, change it and have a good, airtight explanation for it rather than changing it clumsily or changing it and leaving it up to the fans to fight over. When it comes to Exo-1 armor or jet, do what you want and make it either pre- or post-war, just explain it and make it airtight and not open to interpretation for Christ's sake. Also, if you want us to get a life, address things like this directly and or proactively, rather than poke fun at the people that simply care about the products that you actually make. That's my opinion for what it's worth. Before we go here, and to finally attempt to wrap up this video since I've scripted these last parts of it multiple times now, I do think there is a great reward in taking the time to put in the extra work and work on some of the more meticulous details surrounding Fallout's lore and any other aspects of Bethesda's games that the developers are currently working on. A great example of a company that's developed an open-world game recently that has almost absurd levels of attention to detail is Rockstar Games' Red Dead Redemption 2. There's something like 300,000 to 500,000 custom animations for various situations and scenarios that make the game overall feel way more immersive. I also think it's worth noting that Rockstar went above and beyond the Call of Duty and managed to recreate virtually the entire game world map from the very first game in the sequel, and during the game's epilogue, you can travel to many of those areas from the first game. This was a really impressive thing to see a developer do and just goes to show you that the company is doing some next level stuff in their games which blows the minds of game developers and gamers alike. Now I know Rockstar is owned by Take-Two and by extension, they may have access to an incredible amount of resources that Bethesda and ZeniMax might not, but I do think that Bethesda would greatly benefit from looking into and implementing some of the meticulous detail work that Rockstar was able to pull off in Red Dead Redemption 2 for some of their own franchises. Creating a great and fun game to play while also taking that extra bit of time to really delve into the minute details of the game's lore, having a huge variety of animations, overhauling the creation engine to make it more powerful and customizable, or even going that extra mile and recreating parts of the game in its sequel like Rockstar did for Red Dead Redemption 2, could really pay off and allow you guys to receive accolades from the entire gaming community. As an example, imagine for a moment if Elder Scrolls 6 featured all of Tamriel rather than just one small region, like the Elder Scrolls 5 Skyrim. Holy crap, would that be incredible and blow everyone's minds. Ultimately, I know for a fact that you all have a good idea of what works and what doesn't. However, I also think a lot of us more critical fans may have good ideas from time to time too. Maybe not always, but you might be surprised. While I can understand and sympathize based on some of my own experiences that it's difficult to sift through a lot of the noise, it may be worth it, as sometimes you may find a gem or two. Otherwise, guys, I think that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you liked this video, feel free to leave a like, click the bell so you can be notified when I upload more videos, and as always, and again, thank you all so much for supporting this channel. Take care, and I'll see you all in the next one.